Hello. You know what they say in the YouTube biz? 2 videos is profiting from sudden success, 3 is an addiction. So that's why I've brought you some more hand-picked, obscure games that I've been enjoying a great deal the past few weeks. Now, you've seen the thumbnail, and if you're a fan of indie games, which I know you are, you'll already know what game I prepared first, as it's been quite the talk of the town recently within the indie scene. Now, does this mean it's no longer an obscure game? Well, I don't care. You can't stop me from covering absolute peak. This isn't to say I don't have some games in this list that you probably don't know about, and that you probably wish that you did. And if you like all of them, well, you have what they call taste, my friend. From a first-person RuneScape to popping pills in Eastern Europe, and Spelunky for the mentally deranged. Without further ado, let's jump into the first game. FlyKnight is a prime example of indie devs being wizards when it comes to coming up with really good ideas and making them into really good games. On paper, a first-person, RuneScape-themed, Souls-like dungeon crawler that also happens to be co-op sounds like it could really pop off and become an overnight success. I'm sure it's not overwhelmingly positive or anything like that. Jokes aside, I'm sure a lot of you guys already know about this game, but if you don't, well, let me tell you why it's so great. First, it has the RuneScape style down to a T, with its minimalist textures, low poly angular models, and the animations being all jittery and old school. Now, I have a confession. I actually never played RuneScape. I know. Most of the hype around this game was because it looked like first-person RuneScape, but I have to say I have zero nostalgia for the style of the game. But I'm sure most who see it will, and that's probably a big part of why it really took off. Dark Souls, on the other hand, I have played. Well, the first one at least. And that's where the gameplay side of things takes inspiration from. After you make your finest insect warrior, you wake up in a run-down camp, strewn with bodies of both allies and foes. Like any good Souls-like, you start with nothing, but are quickly given some starting gear and then some starting enemies to get a feel for things. The combat is exactly what you'd expect. Very deliberate movements that you must commit to and time right. You're able to parry, and you can even knock down stunned opponents with your kick. There's no dodge roll though. Well, actually, there was no dodge roll when I played, but soon after I recorded my run, the dev added a ring that lets you dodge. So, you can dodge now. An extra feature this game has though is a limb-based system for the combat, meaning you can knock a dude's head off if you have a strong enough weapon, and watch him bleed out. Or disable their ability to do anything by turning them into a walking tree stump. The starting area will lead you down a path, introducing some different enemies and teaching you the basics, until eventually you come across Fisherbug. He explains that the town is in ruins because of one called the Lunar Moth, and not to mention most of the fly population going wingless. Many knights like yourself have delved into her lair, but presumably have not yet returned. He also just wants someone to sit and fish with him, so he gives you his spare rod. But we aren't ready to settle down into a peaceful life just yet. The Lunar Moth must be stopped, and your comrade's wings must be restored. This is where the game really opens up, giving you the freedom to explore and find your own way through the coming challenges. There's no leveling in this game, which makes sense as the playtime isn't too long, about 3 to 4 hours if you beeline to the end like I did. But the lack of leveling gives you the chance to experiment with the range of different weapons, armor and spells, so you're not locked into one build unless you choose to do so. On a whim, I thought it'd be funny to try and only run with fist-based weapons after finding a pair for the first time, and only using my bow and spells if I really needed to, like in the swamps on these guys, because fuck these guys. By the end of my playthrough, I turned myself into a juggernaut, wielding 2 cannonballs on my mighty mitts, which came with 2 downsides. I couldn't see shit, and I basically had no magic resistance. And I'm 90% sure the final boss mostly deals magic damage, as I was dying in about 4 to 5 hits if I wasn't careful. I could, however, absolutely slap the shit out of anything that got too close, but closing that distance took about 3 to 4 working days because of my armor. Now, obviously, you don't have to do this. I've heard most of the bosses can be cheesed using the bow, which sounds about right given the amount of arrows I accumulated throughout my travels. But that's the beauty of it. Run with whatever you want. Unless you're a little bitch. All my homies run nothing but 2 big balls of steel. All the physical defense, no magic resist. Come on now, does this look like a fucking wizard to you? Of course not. So waddle your ass over there and knock his fucking head off. And watch as he still makes a beeline towards you for some reason. Not to worry, give him one more love tap and he's off to insect heaven, like the rest of his black and yellow freaks. Okay, that sounded questionable, but you get where I'm coming from. Just put a little bit of in your playthrough. You can also play this game with your friends. Or open your world up for some randoms to join. Or join someone else's world. But if I've not sold you already, what are you waiting for? The game's like 5 septims. Go play it. It's very good. Now, leaving a realm inhabited by insects, we travel to one of elves, psychoactive substances, and Eastern Europeans. Datura Time is a homegrown, pun intended, Eastern Europe themed action-adventure game with state-of-the-art, cutting-edge graphics from the 90s. Now, I made a comment in my last video about how a lot of niche indie games, and just indie games in general, like to lean towards a PS1 style of graphics as a sort of trend within the scene, but none, to my knowledge, have taken this to the degree of authenticity than this game. You get a disclaimer when booting it up, that it is intended to be played at 640 by 480 resolution. And of course here, my modern gamer instincts kicked in and I immediately tried to change it to 1080p, to which I came to find that by intended, they meant it can only be played in 4:3 aspect ratio. There are actually no settings of any kind for this game. Now, I get that this may put some people off, but personally, I'm not complaining, and I actually praise it for this. The dev clearly wanted it to be as authentic as possible to the true feel and experience of the games released on such consoles, and they sure as hell delivered on this. Sure, the camera is janky. Sure, the only way to turn down the volume is to turn down your PC audio, and everything from the combat to the movement feels incredibly dated. But that's part of the charm. It did give me an extra challenge at the start, having never really played a game like this, but once I got to grips with the controls, I actually really started to get into it. The story starts as follows. You are greeted with a wall of text, explaining that you were on your way to a party within the city. Along the way, you acquired some questionable pills to share with your druzia once you get there. And by the description of the guy you bought them off, you probably should have had them tested before trying some on the way there. Sure enough, those neon green tablets kicked something fierce, and you pass out, only to wake up on a strange platform in a metro you've never seen before. Here you are given the basic but recurring challenge of finding a key to open the exit, and you're introduced to a few residents of this mysterious place. One, a drunk, who rambles angrily about vodka, the key you need to find, and his friend Dragan, who drank some green rakia and went insane. You soon meet Dragan after leaving the platform, and he refers to you as a spiky fuck, which at first I thought was an insult, but as you'll soon see is more of a description. The dialogue ends with him threatening to kill you, and so you gracefully bring him peace with a metal pipe. The next person you meet is a woman spray painting graffiti, some sort of deity marked with the same Cyrillic D as the crates in the station. And you finally learn from her that where you are is another dimension. You got here because you took the new drug that's going around called D, that comes in either liquid form or a tablet, and is made from a potent psychoactive strain of the Datura plant. People often mistake it for other substances and, well, find themselves here. Here having no name, except it being referred to by the people who enter as the Zone. A limbo for Eastern Europeans, some people call it, but for others it is an escape from the real world. She also goes on to explain that if you take more of the drug, you can slow down time, and that you should watch out for the many dangers that reside here, mainly the militia, zombies, and ghouls. There's also something about elves and another dimension parallel to this one, but more importantly, we need to find and activate a portal in order to leave. Then, after finding a Makarov and some Datura pills, you find out what Dragan meant about spiky fucks. Listen, I was still getting used to the controls. After that, you continue through the station, and you're faced with the primary hazard within the zone, the militia. Your pistol isn't great against them, so you're given some Molotov cocktails to help take them out. It took me a few tries to beat them, but soon enough you're able to leave, and then you're met with the great outdoors. only to be gunned down by more militia. And the story continues from there. I can't possibly cover it all in this video, and it's best experienced for yourself. But in short, I had some laughs, I had some spooks, and my fair share of getting frustrated at the difficulty of some of the levels. But all in all, it was honestly very enjoyable. Yes, there's a bit of a hurdle in the way it's presented, with its janky camera and controls, but if you can get past that, the story and the world it creates is very fun to explore. It gets weird, sure, but I mean, you're popping psychoactive pills in another dimension. It's gonna get weird. Still though, the game came out of early access just last month, and for sure needs some more attention, so I would definitely recommend. Now, enough of this hippie nonsense. It's time for something a bit more down to earth. Or rather, up from earth. Next, we have Tower Climb, and you're not going to believe what you do in this game. It is a roguelike platformer, similar to Spelunky in ways, except you go up instead of down, and with much more of a learning curve, and a greater sense that you're only just scraping by. I kind of get Noita vibes with how much content is packed into this seemingly simplistic looking game. Your only goal is to climb. I know, shocker. Driven purely by the thought of reaching the top, which may or may not even exist, and is much easier said than done. The game was in development for an impressive 5 years, crafted by only 2 people, and offers a vast array of secrets, levels, and plenty of suffering, which after 6.5 hours I've only just scratched the surface of. Out of curiosity, I went and looked at the Steam guides, just to get a feel for how much was in this funny little climbing game, and the general tips guide is more like a fucking Bible. Like, I had no idea there were quests, and what the fuck is a temple of devotion? I'm still struggling with the rats. So, to the one person asking for more difficult games last video, this one might take your fancy. Another big feature that sold me on the game was the fact that it is local co-op. Either split screen, which for some reason is capable of supporting a max of 25 players, or you can share the screen, though I think with a more normal amount of max players. So naturally, I gathered some of the goblins that reside in my house, and I definitely didn't persuade them to endure this game with me. We started with a tutorial, which despite it being pretty straightforward, did manage to claim some of us. Perhaps more times than we'd liked. After that, we were let loose into the rest of the game, knowing only the basics and not of the horrors to come. I can always appreciate when a game doesn't explain too much and lets you discover things for yourself, but here, discovering usually means certain demise. The earliest instance of such was down to the procedural nature of the game. You see, not only the layouts of each level are different, but thrown into the mix are certain events that could pop up anytime to put your platforming skills to the test. Another one was the discovery of the Path of Exiles, which later we would come to find is a shortcut between levels, but at first seemed like a trap leading to the violent massacre of the party. I will say though, when playing co-op, oftentimes the biggest threat are the people you bring with you. You see, the inventory system, along with the limited starting items, are all shared between you. So let's say you get unlucky, and the lava event is rolled. In a panic, the complete goblins you brought with you proceed to use up all the jump potions and leave you and anyone else in the dirt, only to perish because the route they took was incorrect. Now you're forced to either die or use the more important items in order to push onward. If you survive, well, you could save up and buy back the lost items, but more often than not, the rest of your party will want reviving, further eating away at your resources. I can't say much more about the game, as, like I said, I haven't got very far due to the difficulty, but I'll probably keep playing it every now and again, given there's so much to discover. What I did experience, though, was very well done, although I suppose that's what 5 years of tweaking and refining the idea leads to. And it kind of fills 2 gaps at the same time, with it being a very fun couch co-op game to play with friends, and a more hardcore experience for fans of games like Noita, which I think is quite the accomplishment. It does have some issues, those pretty much being only to do with the settings, or lack thereof. The available resolutions are a bit funky, and it took me a bit of fiddling around to get it into full screen, and there are no volume options to be seen. Which, yes, I did forgive Datura Time for, but given the nature of this game, some better settings would have been nice. Other than that, what I experienced was pretty much flawless. I'd also like to thank whoever recommended this game to me in the comments on my last video. I'm a big fan of games like this, and I was surprised I didn't find it sooner, given its release date. All in all, it's very challenging, and a little inaccessible with its learning curve and settings, but if you can get past that, it is very fun and rewarding. Now, keeping with the theme of platforming, it's time for something a bit more surreal. Kour 64 is a game that is a little outside my preferred genres, but did end up drawing me in with how unique it is, both art-wise and gameplay. It is a combination of 90s collectathon games, such as Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, and first-person parkour games, like Mirror's Edge, which, if I had to guess, is where the name came from. It sounded a little strange on paper, but this combination of genres does work quite well in practice, and perfectly fits the goofy aesthetic the game has going on. I really enjoyed the almost hand-drawn style, especially the little view model sprites as you traverse, and the array of goofy little characters you can stumble across. It definitely tickled the mischievous goblin part of my brain. Although, if I had to nitpick about the style, something that I was kind of expecting from the title was a more low-res look to things. I could immediately tell that the game was made in Unreal Engine upon booting it up for the first time, and everything felt a little bit too clean. There was an option for lower resolutions, even 480p, but it didn't really change much, and it kept bugging out every time I switched. Don't get me wrong, I like the art direction. It definitely fits the style of the games the dev was inspired by, but personally I think it could do with a bit of an old school filter pulled over things. Again though, just my preference. On the gameplay side of things, I found it very enjoyable. I don't have very much experience with collectathon games, as, like I said, it's not a genre I ever really got into, but nevertheless, I did enjoy jumping around the game's environments, collecting the array of trinkets, with the movement mechanics being very well executed. They were a little fiddly at times, or at least I found them to be, though that could be down to me still getting to grips with them, but for the most part the movement was very fun, with all the bells and whistles you'd expect. The game itself revolves around this kind of hub area that contains all the available levels you can explore, with stats for each one displaying what items you've collected. There are some areas that need to be unlocked with said items, but most of the game is available to you right away, ready for you to explore at your own pace, with each level having the option to return to the hub at any time. The game, from what I can tell, is quite short, although I have yet to 100% all the levels. But given the price and the clear passion from the dev that went into combining two genres that do work very well together, I'd say if you're a fan of such games, it's very much worth it. As always, thanks for watching, and if you have any games you think I should check out, please feel free to leave a comment. I do take them into account, most of the time. Make sure to stay tuned as there'll be more of these to come, but I do plan to mix things up a bit going forward. And with that, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.